Hey friends and family, this one is probably more for my family, but anyone else, as with all my videos, who is interested in hearing what I have to say is more than welcome to hang around and listen. For those of you who are new subscribers, I like to remind the audience from time to time that I created this channel for my ancestors and my grandchildren in particular, who I remember when my grandparents died. By the time I was smart enough to ask questions and have curiosity about their lives, they were dead, So I don't want that to happen to my grandchildren. And even though I have a relationship with them now, as they get older, they may want to understand me in a different way and more fully as who I am. In particular, I had one ancestor, Josepha, who was my inspiration for creating this channel, because she was a fascinating person, and I only know bits and pieces of her. I've put the content together for a video for her, but I haven't released it to my family yet, but I will soon. Well, I will one of these days. One of the things that I wanted to talk about, in case any of my ancestors, when I die and you pick and choose the stuff you want from my house, probably the things that are most sacred to me are the things that are in my tarot parlor. I have objects in my tarot parlor, most of them not worth very much, the only things that are worth money is like the occasional, expensive tarot deck. But as far as like personal items, they're more sentimental, or they have more meaning to me from a long period of time of owning it, rather than because they're valuable. One object that you may notice, and I think I'm going to put it up in that area of the wall when I finish this video, is the Phaistos Disc, which I bought in Crete back in 1983. And I'll get into talking to you about what the significance of my trip to Crete was. The meaning for my trip to Crete was I was just young, I was not married, I was free, and I wanted to explore the world. I had a little money, I had a really great job, and I could afford to take a trip. So I planned I think it was like a 3-week trip, and I planned it like meticulously. I knew everything I wanted to see before I got to Greece, and I think, if I recall, I had like 15 airplane flights scheduled within a 10-day period, because of course the Grecian islands are, islands, and there's mainland and there's islands. But to see everything I wanted to see, I had to really hop. I did it by myself. I didn't have a tour guide. There was no guide that took me to everything I wanted to see. So I had to make the decision and do the research myself, which is what I did. And I saw everything that I knew about going into the trip that I had wanted to see. So of course, I think actually this was found historically. It was found in Phaistos, which is like southern central Crete. But I have a feeling that I saw this object in a museum, Heraklion Museum in Crete, but that might have been more towards Knossos, which is north of Phaistos. I could be wrong, but I don't recall being in Phaistos, which is where this is from. So it was probably seen in the more popular area of Knossos in the museum. Now, here's the object. It fascinated me to no end. Now, my object was just like a tourist, a tourist item, and there was a million of these on the street, and it didn't cost very much money. And mine only has one side. It only has inscriptions on one side. I don't know why the tourist, souvenir people only did one side, but it had two sides, and this was the particular side that the souvenir makers decided to use when they reproduced this disc. Now, I don't know how good of a reproduction it is. I don't know if this was just drawn by hand to mimic the original, or if any kind of plaster casts were ever made of it, and then other items were, these kind of items were like recreated. I can't really speak on that. But this clearly is just ceramic. Now, what do we know about the Phaistos disc? They know a little bit about it, but it's kind of an unknown. There's no one's broke the code yet. Now, I took some notes because I did a little bit of research before I began this video, and it's known to be a Cretan artifact. I mean, it was found in Crete. It was discovered in 1908, and it's been determined that it is not a forgery because some of the images, some of the symbols on this disc that appear on this disc, appear on other items that were found after this disc was found. And so whoever created this disc didn't have knowledge of the other items because those other items hadn't been discovered yet. So it seems as though that this is an authentic artifact from ancient times. It's believed the date, and it's a big span, is from 1800 to 7th century BC. On the back of this, the dates given is from 1700 to 1500 BC. But it's a larger span according to the research I did today. It's created by stamp decorations. The original was pink clay that was intentionally hardened. So it was intentionally baked. It wasn't like, so that's interesting for them to know. But this one, for whatever reasons, they recreated it in green. Who knows? It has 61 fields. If you'll notice, there's like sections, there's segments, right? And so it's considered that there's 61 fields containing groups of signs. There's 242 symbols all in all. I think there's like 46 or 64. I remember those two numbers. I don't know if my brain reversed them. But there's like 46 or 64 individual stamps that are just repeated in combination with one another for a total of 242 occasions of stamping. That would make it the first example of movable type, because it is believed that each one of these stamps was made out of some type of metal. So it could have been bronze, it could have been gold. They don't really know. There's no way of proving what the stamps were. But there's a consistency in the original between each of the appearances, for example, of whatever that thing is. Maybe it's a bird. Now this one may have not been as perfectly drawn, so the stamps themselves may have been hand-drawn, so there might be inconsistency in each individual appearance of the bird, right? It may not be exactly the same as it appears throughout. But the original, if there was a bird symbol, it was consistent like with all the other bird symbols because it was just a stamp. Now, the location where it was found in some type of Minoan palace or a court-centered type of building, like a ceremonial building or something like that, or an administration center. So it was in an important or significant structure. The script is similar but extremely unique because it shares no common characters with any known language. There was talk that I remember hearing. Let's see. There's a Cretan hieroglyphic from 2100 to 1700 BCE, which is the oldest. Then there's Linear A from 1800 to 1450 BCE. And then there's Linear B, which is sounds, like the symbols have sounds, which is, they believe this to also, each one of these symbols has a sound. They don't know what the sounds, they know what the sounds even sound like. They know what the sounds sound like. But when they put it all together, they can speak the whole thing. They just have no idea what it means. And the Linear B sound alphabet or collection of letters or whatever these things are, it was prevalent between 1450 and 1200 BCE. So it has similarities to all three of these. I don't know if they're called languages. I guess they would be. Or it has similarities to Cretan hieroglyphic, linear A, linear B, and yet it's unique because it's not really like any of them, completely. Some people believe that there's an Indo-European influence here, but but most of the scholars don't agree with that, but some do. That there's like an Indo-European influence, but it seems more that the scholars believe that it really is more genuinely Greek in nature. It's got, they call it syllabic. It's syllabic in nature, meaning like sounds, like it. I think that's what that meant. And because certain segments, not that I can identify them like on the cuff here, but for example, certain segments are repeated, throughout the disc. So like a sequence of certain characters, I'm just using this as an example. The sequence of certain characters is repeated throughout the disc, perhaps on both sides. And so for that reason, because they think of it as something that's repeated, they think it maybe is some type of prayer where, like, how you repeat parts of a prayer, or some kind of magical thing where you repeat parts of a magical enchantment. My little cynical head, because when I first saw it and when I first started thinking about it without reading up on it, I thought it was like a game board, And how do they know it? The things that repeat themselves aren't saying, go back 3 spaces. How many children board games do we have? Or says, go back 2 spaces, I mean, that's not really religious, and it's not really, it's not really magical. But because I guess of the location where it was found, it wasn't found in homes where it might be considered a game. I guess they considered it was found in a significant enough location that the import of it is escalated beyond just like a common game. But that would be my instincts. Many attempts have been made to translate this thing, and I think there's been like 18 attempts to completely translate it, and they claim that they've done it from start to finish, and they have their interpretation. But 18 different people, I think it was 18, have done it, and none of them match. So even though it's weird, they can apply meaning that makes sense in 18 different with 18 different interpretations. I hope I explained that right. It's just crazy. Just crazy. So, let's see. Everyone who's ever translated it has come up with a different meaning for each of the phrases and each of the words. But the common opinion is that it's religious in nature or magical in nature. Each sign has a sound. 8 phonetic signs are known. So there are 8 individual, I don't know which ones they are, but there are 8 particular, images, right? That they absolutely know what the sounds are. Somehow they just know it. Maybe there's other similarities to known languages, and they share the common, they share a commonality with another language that they know the sound of. But there are 8 of these little things that they know exactly what it sounds like, and they're surmising, I guess, what the other ones are. So I thought it would be fun to do a reading on this. Who am I to question the scholars who have spent their, careers trying to figure this thing out? I'm nobody, and I'm sure it's exactly what they say it is. But I thought it would be fun because I'm always looking for new applications for tarot. So I figured, why not do a reading on what the heck is this thing? What is this thing? what significance does it have? And, you know, maybe the cards will help us see it in a new light and give us new ideas. And for this reading, I figured I would use, I think it was called the Mythic Tarot. I forget the whole name, because in those days when I bought this deck, it was the fashion to throw away the box. And this box was rather large and clumsy. And to just, you know, keep the cards in a sack, which I've had it in the same sack since 1986 when this deck came out. I'll flip the camera to show you this deck. This is the first edition of this deck. I forget, it was called the Mythic Tarot. I have the book. Hold on, let me grab the book. Okay, the book was called The Mythic Tarot, A New Approach to the Tarot Cards by Juliet Sharman Burke and Liz Green. Cards illustrated by Trisha Newell. And I really loved this deck when I first got it, because I really loved Greek mythology. I had, as I mentioned, I had spent some time in Greece, and I was just so fascinated by and appreciative of Greek culture. And I have some Greek in me. The part of me that's Italian seems to have strong reference, strong ties to Greece. My DNA results came out. There seems to be a connection of how my people crossed from like the Greek islands to, more like Italian islands, and then to the Italian mainland. But at any rate, so I had an interest in this. Now, the book fell apart like almost instantly. Like, you open the book, the first edition, you open the book and pretty much you read it before you even finish reading it one time, the spine fell off. So I don't know if it's still in print, and I don't know if they've improved upon the quality, but you can see that it's really like very, 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 very fragile. And as I mentioned, I no longer have the box for it because it just wasn't what was done in those days. The cardstock, leaves a lot to be desired. It's pretty much just cardboard. And I used it a lot. And I have other decks from that period of time that I used even more often, and those cards are almost pristine. But you can see the wear and tear on any of these random cards on the backs. You can see the date, copyright, Trisha Newell, 1986. And we only have one item in the center. I think in subsequent publications, they may have made it so that you could not see where the reversals were. But each of the images, loosely following the Rider-Waite-Smith tradition, tells a story of, ancient Greek mythology. And at the time, I was well read up on all of them, but now I don't really remember very well. So anyway, I just thought this would be an appropriate deck to use for determining what this disc might have been, the purpose of, what the purpose of this disc might have been. And I figured what fun to be able to showcase a deck that I have not ever shown on this channel, and just so I'd kill two birds with one stone, three birds with one stone. I get to do a demonstration reading. I get to talk on a disc, this artifact in my tarot parlor that one day one of my ancestors might be curious about what the heck it is, and then being able to tie it into showcasing a deck from, at least, not from Greece, but at least sharing, Greek mythology. So I went off camera already, and I handled and mixed the cards, and I concentrated in that regard for a most logical or, meaningful way to understand what this thing is. But I'm just, shuffling in front of you guys a few times so that you know that it's a sincere reading. So we have 10 of Wands. Now, I'm probably going to have to go off camera and look up what each one of these myths was, what it's referring to, because I no longer recall. So I will do that because I want to be, I accurate in what the intentional reading is. However, if we just look at it without understanding the myth behind it, we have some type of animal skin, hide, a ram, a goat, a woman who is inside of a burning structure, and there's a shore, or at least there's a boat that looks like it's seen better days. It's a little bit, it looks like it might be a little bit dilapidated. I'll lay 3 cards for this to see what the purpose of this thing was. Then we have a woman. She's also holding fire. Is it the same woman? Now this woman is seated with a lioness, and it is the Queen of Wands. She has the lions on her chair. So far, fire. I guess that does suggest ceremony, doesn't it? And the last one is the Fool. Well, that one would make it, that one would make it look like a foolish pastime, because didn't tarot originally mean, or not the word tarot, but the Italian form, like tarocco, didn't that mean like foolish pastime or something like that? I used to know, I forget, but the word for tarot, I think when it was translated, in one of the forms of the word tarocchi or tarocchino or something like that, I think literally meant like, or was it minchiati? Well, it was one tarot name of a deck that I think literally meant like a foolish waste of time, which card games, I guess, could be seen that way, like a funny way to put it. So here we have something that looks ceremonial, and then we have something that looks a little more lighthearted, doesn't it? Let's see, we wouldn't count the Queen, but we could count, and we wouldn't count the Fool because that's 0. So if we were to count, this card is the only card to give us a quintessential clue. It would be 10, which would be the Wheel of Fortune, which is interesting because doesn't this look like a wheel? Oh my gosh, this is so interesting. Let me pull the wheel. All right, well, interestingly, when I got out the book and I began to read, what was intended to be shown in each of these images, it turns out that this particular deck, and I forgot all about that, didn't have the numeric sequence that we're accustomed to. And what I had assumed was the quintessential card, 10, I assumed it would be the Wheel of Fortune. But as it turns out, in this particular deck, the Strength card is the number 10 card. So if you read the deck, you have to honor that, the Strength card is the intended 10th card of this deck. Now, it's true that there are no numbers on this deck of the higher order cards. So I guess you're entitled to do whatever you want, but I try to honor the sequence, or the intention of the deck creator as much as I can. And if I don't have access to that information, then I go with it on my own terms. But, when you know better, you do better, right? Okay, so this first woman is actually not a woman. The 10 of Wands appears to be, according to the book, is Jason in a state of oppression. That's his ship, the Argo, in dilapidated form in the background. The golden fleece is what's in front of him, and I should have realized that. It's been many years since I studied this and was adept in understanding mythology. I just don't remember. And he is burdened by what he still has left to accomplish, which kind of is reflective of the disc, isn't it? It's, we're nowhere near ready to understand what this thing says. So it kind of is reflective of what's going on with this disc, isn't it? Imagination is trapped by worldly burdens and responsibilities. The second card, the Queen of Wands, represents Queen Penelope, who was the wife of Odysseus, the wandering hero of Ithaca. Because she was a female child, her history is that her father flung her into the sea because he wanted a son. But when ducks saved her and she ended up surviving, her father was kind of impressed by her. So he decided that she probably was destined for greatness. She ended up, as I mentioned, being married to Odysseus. And when it was believed that Odysseus died, she was on the throne, but there were many men suitors who wanted to claim her for their wife because they would assume the throne. But she was very clever, and she held off the suitors. I guess she wasn't interested in giving up her, she wasn't giving up her power, or maybe she was just so devoted to her husband she couldn't imagine being with any other man. Pick which one you think it might have been. But it turns out that Odysseus came back to her at some point, and so her husband had been returned to her. Now, Fool is represented by Dionysus, the child of Zeus and Semele, who was a mortal woman. This is an image of, mysterious impulse to leap into the unknown. So just impulses, to the impulse to take risks and not worry about the consequences. The Hercules card. Hercules was also a child of Zeus, born with a mortal woman and in an adulterous affair. So his wife, Hera, was very, very jealous of this offspring of Zeus. And so she punished him with terrible, terrible punishments, which drove him mad. And as a result, it turns out that he ended up killing his wife and his whole family, his children. So when he realized what he had done, he was just beyond himself with grief. And so he went to the gods and asked for something that he could do to prove himself worthy or to be forgiven, to erase this terrible, terrible thing that he'd done. And so they gave him 12 things that were near impossible to accomplish. I guess they were considered I don't know what they were called, but it was 12 years of arduous tasks or arduous labor. So I don't know how many tasks there were, but I know it was 12 years of trying to accomplish things. So there we have the cards drawn to help us understand what the heck is going on with this disc. Now, had it been the Wheel of Fortune, I think it would have really been cool because it's a spiral, right? And so this is like but that's just not the way it is in this deck. It's this one. So it could be, since the authorities seem to think that it's some type of prayer or some kind of thing that's an enchantment or a magical expression, maybe it's a prayer for forgiveness. Maybe it's a prayer of like a little bit of vanity, and a prayer to like relieve us of mortal mistakes or mortal impulses, and maybe that's the nature of the prayer. I don't know if any of the 18 translations of this thing have anything to do with a prayer for forgiveness, but that would be an interesting place to look, right? I'd be interested to know if any of those 18 translations had anything to do with a prayer for forgiveness. Well, I hope you think this was interesting. And especially if you're one of my descendants, I do want to put it out there that I met your grandfather or your great-grandfather. I met my first husband in Greece. And so, Greece, there's very many happy memories of Greece. When I was young and I was beautiful and I was a lot younger than I am now. And I was very independent, and I attracted a young man who kind of thought I was attractive, and we spent a few days in the same location. I mean, I had an itinerary, and when it departed from what his itinerary was, we went our separate ways, but we exchanged information to contact one another. As it turned out, I lived in Philadelphia, he lived in New Jersey. So of all the locations that each of us could have lived, how convenient that we lived within 2 hours of one another. Because if we didn't, you guys wouldn't exist. But so that's like this, so I met your grandfather. I met my first husband in Greece, and he was, the male antecedent of my my descendants. He's the father of your parents. And I don't know how many years these videos will exist. I mean, some of you may be reading this in 50 years and it would be a great-great-great-great-grandfather or something like that. Anyway, I hope you found this video interesting and fun. I'm always trying to find new ways to interpret the cards and to use the cards, because how many times can I continue to do videos? I have to be motivated and I have to have fun, right? And so I try to offer fun readings. Oh, and if you notice that I'm wearing the same outfit, the same shirt at least, in the video I did, which I released yesterday, bear in mind that I did both of these videos within a 10-minute time frame of one another. So I finished one video that I showed yesterday, and I just started this video 10 minutes after I ended that one. So it's all within the same couple of minutes that I wore the shirt between videos. So please don't think or criticize me from wearing the same shirt from day to day, because many times I'll do several videos and then release them over a period of a few days, because I have a very hectic schedule coming up and I'm not going to be able to do videos for a few days. So I figured at least I'll get one extra one for tomorrow. Until next time, friends, peace and family. Peace, stay well, be kind, and do no harm.